Good morning, good afternoon, Commission officers, and thank you for joining. My name is Robin Davidson, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Division of Commission Personnel Support. Thank you for joining this update regarding the new Health Profession Special Pay Policy. This session is being recorded, and I will pass it over to Mr. Dylan Dell, who will give us updates on the policy.
Thank you, ma'am. Hi, I'm Dylan Dell. I work in DCPS. I'm one of the HR specialists. I work in the FSB branch portion. If you guys have pay issues, you probably know who I am. So hopefully we've gotten those resolved and we're working on those. Today we're going to be talking about the 2025 HPSP update that's happening with CCI 633.01. Some of the changes and some of the items that are going on with it. There's probably going to be a lot of questions that are going to happen as we start presenting this, and you guys can absolutely start putting them in the chat. Just we're probably going to keep rolling through until we get to the end. So that way we get everything covered. Everyone that needs to leave can leave then, and we'll talk about questions afterwards. But we just wanted to give you at least an information on what we know about the policy right now based off what we have read on the policy and any information that we're requesting forward and what we're trying to get clarification on. So to begin, we'll just start out over here with the overview of what we have for the HPSP update. Rear Admiral Batiste, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. If I could just jump in real quick, I want to start with a few words and I'll turn it right back over to you. So again, grateful for everyone jumping on today to talk about the new special pay policy. I just want to, just make a few comments. So this is in some ways a monumental shift or change for commission officers, which is fantastic, obviously for both recruitment but also retention of our officers. So this is huge, right? I want to say a few words of caution as well, just for our officers. And we'll get into more of this, and Dylan and the team has a great update and great information today. So for our officers, I think we need to be very careful about how we talk about this increase in pay, how we verbalize it to others around us. This is a large increase, and that has a lot of implications. And so while it is great for our officers, and I obviously 100% support it and have been involved with it, I do think we have to be cautious and careful about how we talk about it, who we talk about it with, etc. Secondly, as we become more expensive, because essentially that's what this does, we also have to be cautious and cognizant of who we are as officers, the work we do, the value we bring. So I know I'm preaching to the choir because the majority of you are amazing, fantastic officers that do incredible work for your sites and for our agency, and that's great. We need to continue to do that, continue to show our worth, our value, and just know that this has been a long time coming. A lot of these special pays haven't been updated for almost 20 years. So it's long overdue. However, in the current environment that we find ourselves in, money, pay, etc., are all kind of hot topics, right? So I just wanted to jump in real quick to start, just to make sure we're all on the same page, that this is a fantastic thing. This is a great thing. I'm extremely excited about the future for our officers, particularly our IHS officers. I also want us to be cautious and be cognizant, and just to make sure that we're all on the same page with that. So Dylan, thanks for letting me jump in. Again, I appreciate everybody joining, and I'll turn it back over to you, sir. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Great opening remarks. Yeah, so we'll just get started. This is generally what we're going to be talking about today for the 2025 HPSP update. It's going to be an overview of some of the major changes that we have going on, reiterating, because a lot of individuals have just now become qualified or are going to be eligible for HPSP. So I just want to go over some of the general eligibility requirements for HPSP, look at some of those, and specifically what kind of CCI 633.01 says in there. We'll cover a little bit on how to apply for new rates. So that goes over new agreements and renegotiating agreements if you currently have an agreement out there that's either a rate has increased and you want to try to apply for that. We'll go over the general category changes that have happened, and just generally what you can do to prepare in the meantime. As of right now, we're not taking any new agreements because we're still waiting some clarification from CCHQ on some of this. So we're still in that point, and then just a couple of FAQs, and we'll get to questions and answer anything else that you guys have at that point. All right. So some of the major changes that you'll end up seeing that are happening with the new updates to the special pays. The big one that everyone probably sees is that a lot of updates and changes and rate increases have occurred for most categories. We'll talk about those kind of broken down per category later on, but I think that's one of the big ones. Another one is that officers in the 07 grade and above are exempt from practice hours. So, Rear Admiral Batiste, congratulations. Some of the big changes that we were able to help get affected is that the pharmacy resident program is now eligible for the Ascension bonus. I think we were getting those kind of passed through along anyway, but I think we got the policy officially updated for that. Another big one is the medical students license. For any USIS grads that were currently in residency, we got that eligible. They've always had a rate, but one of the points of clarification is that they weren't able to apply because they didn't have an unrestricted license. We'll get to some of that as we go. And then there's just been some updates and some adjustments to some of the BCIP for dietitians, for your board certified sponsors and some of the specialties that are there. And those are covered within the slides a little bit, but that mostly you can see it inside the actual policy itself. All right, so quick, we'll go over this. I'm not going to read every portion of this. We'll just kind of hit it. These are the general eligibility requirements for being able to apply for HPSP. Some are pretty easy. You just got to be within your profession. You have to have an unrestricted license or certificate within that. You have to make sure that you're maintaining your conditions of service as you normally need to do. A big one that we do end up checking, again, with all this as we check through when we submit these, is that you have to have a satisfactory COER on file. So those are all big important things. You have to make sure that you're not under any investigation. You don't have any letter of reprimands, any AWOLs in the last 12 months, or pending administrative action, because that's going to stop you from getting any of these submitted or being able to go through there. Another big thing, and sometimes this is something that people don't, it seems pretty common sense, but you have to be able to remain on active duty for the specified time for any of your HPSPs. So if you sign a 4-year or 6-year RB agreement, you have to be able to be in the Corps for another 6 years. And then duty status, there's a couple of things that come out of that. I'm sorry, I skipped practice hours. We'll get into that a little more when it comes down to each individual eligibility. But practice hours are important when it comes down to applying for HPSP rates, and they're listed out individually as we go. And then duty status, the biggest thing is you just have to make sure that you are not in a non-duty with pay status, and you have to make sure that you haven't used so much sick leave within that amount of time. It puts your HPSP into an issue. All right, so when we look at that, most of these special pays then fall within their own subcategories of eligibility. So to do that, you have to meet all the sections that we just talked about for eligibility. You have to have one of the listed professions for IP in the appendices that are listed in 633.01. And the main thing that we're really looking at, we're talking about, is practice hours. So some things that haven't typically become an issue for individuals like pharmacists and everything else, as you know, you guys should be constantly doing your practice hours and getting everything up to date. As we submit new agreements forward, they're going to be looking back to make sure that your practice hours are up to date and that they have been submitted. So for IP and applying for IP rates, this is going to be an important step and an important part to make sure that we are making sure updated within the policy. Now, we are trying to get clarification on that when it goes forward with some of these agreements getting submitted, but generally from what the policy reads right now is that you have to have your practice hours updated for your 80 hours, and it has to be in the system through forms. For individuals that have been doing RBs and IPs, this isn't new or commonplace for you. but it does affect you sometimes when you guys are reapplying. And if you haven't had your practice hours up to date in the system, that generally is going to cause your HPSP to lag behind when you apply for it, because they won't publish it until your practice hours are updated. So that's it generally for incentive pay. We'll talk about retention bonuses. Same general points for that. The only difference is that you have to be an 06 or below to be able to get a retention bonus. You have to have completed any other ADOs or CSOs or commitments that basically came about from any sort of training or scholarship. This is primarily hits up our senior co-steps and our USIS grads. And there's specific verbiage in there that talks about those individuals and what they have to do and how long that they have to wait before some of that. USIS grads are a little different, and there's variations on that. Practice hours, again, is a very huge thing. Although I will say this, and one thing that's extremely small but definitely underlined on here is that if your practice hours aren't currently up to date, but you just became eligible for it, you don't have to go back and go through the backdating. Now, if it's tied to an IP agreement, it's a little different. But just know that if you are eligible for an RB for the first time due to a policy update, like the one we just had, you're not required to submit evidence for practice hours for dates before the RB availability. So pretty big thing on that. Again, practice hours, if I can't harp that, if you can walk away from this, is that practice hours are important. That's about halfway there. All right. Board certified incentive pay is pretty easy when it comes down to this. Same thing, meet all the general requirements and just make sure that the board certification that you are applying for is one of the ones in the authorized appendices in Appendix E in the CCI. And if you guys look through it, it'll say what it is, and it's pretty specific on what it is. So if you have one that's slightly worded different from a different sponsor, from a different certified board sponsor, but it still says something for pediatrics or something else like that, it has to pretty much say verbatim, right? It has to be within that to be able to qualify. So the big thing is, how are you going to apply for HPSPs? For any individuals that are getting new agreements, it's a pretty simple process. You have to make sure that you fill out the applicable forms, as we have on here. You have to fill out the effective date, and if it's newly eligible within this policy, the effective date that is eligible for it is 1 October 2025. Again, a very key date to remember. You just need to make sure that once you've filled out the form and you've signed the date on it for the effective date, you need to sign the agreement and have your supervisor sign it. If you can get your budget official to sign it, awesome. After that, you just need to get a copy of your license and board certification and get all those documents sent off to your regional liaison. Now, there's a note. If you are eligible for RB and IP, so if you're applying for a new for a new RB rate and you're currently getting IP, or vice versa within that, both agreements have to come at the same time. I don't understand. It used to be back in the old CCI that IP rates would vary based off the RB agreements, but they want them lumped together, and it says so specifically in the CCI. So a little different if you're renegotiating an agreement. So what is a renegotiating agreement? So as many of you have seen, if you guys have looked through the policy, and we'll go over what the rates look like here in a minute too. Certain rates have gone up. So retention bonuses have increased in a lot of categories. Incentive pay has increased in some categories. The only way that you're going to be able to do this is that if you submit a new agreement. You can renegotiate an RB agreement perfectly fine along with incentive pay and BCIP. The way is that you have to have the agreement and you have to make sure that the agreement's not going to go over the same length of time. So if you're trying to renegotiate a 4-year RB agreement, you have to apply for a 4-year agreement or a 6-year agreement. You can't say, I'd like to now do this as a 2-year agreement. It doesn't work that way. For RB renegotiations, we're going to need a memo. We'll get all that sent out once we get further clarification from CCHQ. So I wouldn't even pay mind to that right now. And then the same general process goes on with everything else. So once you have that done and you know what you need, go through all these documents. We'll talk about it specifically with IP and BCIP. Those two specifically are going to need new agreements, as far as we're aware right now, to be submitted now that the rate has increased, to be able to get the higher rates of incentive pay and for the higher rates of board certified incentive pay. That's pretty much it with that. So now we're going to kind of go over the individual categories. So some of the big changes that happen with it. For medical officers, they've increased the rates for RB agreements pretty well across the board. Here you can kind of see a highlighted portion of it. You can look inside the policy itself and see. They removed a lot of the incentive pay rates that were tied to RB. So this pretty much only affected medical officers. And so many times when a medical officer would apply for an RB rate, they would get an increased incentive pay rate based off the fact that they were tying it to an RB. That's taken away now. So some areas you might see where incentive pay has actually gone down because of that, but the drastic increase in the RB rate has gone up. So realistically, it's a win when it comes down to that portion of it. And the big thing that we talk about with these RBs is that the inclusion of the 6-year agreement. So now no longer is it just a 4-year agreement. You can go all the way up to 6, get a larger amount, and have that go. And then board certified incentive pay has gone up for medical officers from 6,000 to 8,000. That's across the board, but you'll see that as we're going. All right, for dental officers, we have an increased rate for RB agreements, just the same thing with the 6-year agreement, board certified incentive pay. They also added an additional dental specialty on here, as you can see, anesthesiology. So all positive things when we look at that. For nurses, I think one of the biggest changes, one of the biggest updates is that there's an RB rate for nurses now, not just nurse practitioners. There's a note specifically on it that this is meant for registered nurses who do not meet this eligibility for specialty nurse RBs. So it's set up in there. So that is, I think, a huge win for the nursing community, and I'm sure everyone's pretty happy about that, as they should be. Same things that they added 6-year RB agreements. So again, if you're a nurse practitioner, if you're in those other specialty categories, CRNA, they have a 6-year rate for you. Board certification has also increased. Again, things you have to apply for. And then just a couple of categories got added. They've also increased the number of eligible board certifications for BCIP. So if you look inside Appendix E, you should be able to see that for the different ones. There's a lot. I didn't want to list them all. All right. Huge update for engineers. Engineers, put your ears on. I'm sure this is important for you. You guys have become eligible for incentive pay. There's a caveat to that. We'll get to that. Same thing with your RB, and there's eligibility for board certified incentive pay. And the biggest caveat is the note that we have on here. For an engineer to be eligible for IP and RB, they must have a current, valid, and unrestricted professional engineer registration or have 4 years of professional experience with a license or certification relating to their specialty that the director at CCHQ approves. What those currently are, we don't know. And those are questions that we're going to be getting asked, or that we're going to ask CCHQ, and we're going to try to get clarification from their FSB branch and policy and what that specifically goes through. But huge. The vast majority of the engineers in IHS have their PEs. So when going forward and you guys are applying for that, just make sure that we got any of those licenses and agreements getting pushed forward with it. For the scientist rate, for the 3 scientists we have, I just figured I'd include a little snippet here. They've included a couple of different specialties within this, but it's the same general thing. Increased rates for RB agreements, inclusion of the 6-year agreement, and board certified incentive pay has increased because it's increased for everyone across the board. And then they made a couple snippet notes. So if you're one of the 3 scientists in IHS and you have more questions, you can send me a message after this. Looking over at EHOs, they fall pretty much in the same line as engineers when it came down to there's a huge increase for them. So you're going to become eligible for incentive pay, RB and BCIP, all with an asterisk. And the asterisk is they have to be eligible if you have a current, valid, and unrestricted certified industrial hygienist, certified safety professional registered, or environmental health specialty registered sanitation, all the other ones sitting inside here that qualifies for your specialty. You have to have those when you submit this forward. So big, it's important. It's super huge that you have those items. So if you don't have them now, you have until 1 October to try to work and get those done. Same thing as the eligibility for board certified incentive pay. So look it over, and that should be able to give you a good idea on what you're eligible for BCIP. Pharmacists have a pretty great increase. So incentive pay has increased from 15,000 to 25,000. DCIP has also increased, and one of the big ones is pharmacy residents qualify for ascension bonuses, which I think they have in the last couple of years since we've gotten it kind of amended. But at least now that we officially have this kind of statement in policy, we've gotten quite a few done. And once we see new pharmacy residents come in, we've been getting them pretty well covered down. All right, dietitians. So the biggest change that comes down to dietitians is that they have removed a couple specialties in rates, and they've also added a couple. So currently, if you look back at the old CCI and you look at what the new one is, if your rate is no longer listed in the current one, they will not accept any more BCIP agreements for this category and specialty. So just kind of make that as a note. The biggest thing is that they, after 1 October 2027, they're going to expire. So if that becomes a thing, just make sure that you're working on whatever else you need to. If you need to get registered in a different board certification or what you need to do, that's going to be important when it comes down to this. Therapists, they added the RB agreement rate, not a 4-year or not a 6-year one, but for 4 years, which is awesome. They updated the BCIP eligibility list, so you guys also have an increased number of sponsors and eligibilities for your specialties, and the same thing, BCIP has increased for everyone across the board. HSOs, which are pretty important, increase the rate of RB agreements. Inclusion of the 6-year RB agreement, board certification is increased, and they included a couple of additional categories for that. You'll see some of the rates have also increased for officers. I think one of the big ones is optometrists have increased in the amount that they're going to be getting for incentive pay. So before we get into some of the FAQ portions, and as we're waiting clarification, what should I do to prepare for these new HPSPs? The biggest thing you can do is make sure that your license and board certifications are up to date. Make sure they're updated in your EOPF and your PIR with current dates and that they won't expire within that same time frame. Next one is make sure your practice hours are up to date. Practice hours for a lot of individuals that weren't having to do it for RB agreements on their anniversaries, make sure that you're going into the system and you're getting them updated to make sure that you are not running into any issues when your HPSP gets submitted to CCHQ and they come back saying, we need current practice hours set up for this. So set yourself up as best you can for success now, so we're not running into issues in the future. And then the last one, which seems kind of obvious, is make sure that you're meeting all the eligibility requirements for HPSP that we covered in the start of this. So hugely important. Make sure you're going through and you're meeting that. So a couple FAQs. Absolutely. Ms. Davidson said it best. Reach out to your liaison for that. FAQs. Can I submit my new agreements now? So no. So currently we're going to be waiting on clarification from CCHQ. We got a few questions that we're just wanting to get clarification on when it comes down to the new agreements, when it comes down to a couple of different things. That way we aren't getting promises to individual items before we are asking for agreements back. What is my eligibility date for new agreements? This has been a point of contention, and a lot of people have asked this question, and it is buried at the very bottom of the policy before it gets to the rates. For all active duty officers and regular corps officers, it's 1 October of 2025. I know that the effective date of the agreement was 14 January of 2025. The eligibility date for you is 1 October of 2025, but the policy is technically in effect for that portion. If my incentive pay or BCIP rate increases, do I have to fill out a new agreement? The answer is yes. As of right now, if your rates have increased, you have to submit a new agreement. That's what it says in policy. Now we're trying to get some clarification to see exactly what CCHQ is going to do with that. But that is something we're still working on. Which falls into the next question. Will I get a new 12-month commitment for signing a new IP or BCIP agreement for the higher rate? Yes. Per policy, it says that you will get a new 12-month commitment. Again, we're talking to CCHQ about this on exactly how that works, especially for officers that are less than a year from retirement or anything like that. When is the new RB agreement for the 6 years getting released? We're expecting sometime in June of 2025. from what we heard, it's in the final states of approval, and seeing if any other agreements have to get updated as well. Can I renegotiate my RB agreement for a lower time commitment? Cannot. I think we talked about this previously. RB renegotiations cannot be for a time commitment less than the original agreement. When can I start submitting for a new or renegotiated agreement? So 90 days prior to the effective date. So in this case, we're looking at 1 July of 2025. If we get information out to you faster, we absolutely will start pushing this information out to officers to let them know, because we want these agreements in early so we can make sure that we're getting them vetted, we get everything signed properly, and we get all the documents to submit them. Should I wait to submit my agreement until 1 October 2025? No. So the sooner that we can get these agreements to start rolling in, the better. Just like everyone's limited staff-wise, we are limited staff-wise as well. It would help me because at some point these agreements get back to me and I'm going to be going through them. I'll be making sure that everything's in the right spot. People put it all in. So if you messed up your agreement entirely and you didn't know and it wasn't caught by your regional liaisons, I'm going to finalize. They're going to look at it before it gets submitted to CCHQ to make sure that all your eligibility agreements are in there. Everything looks right. COERs are up to date and we're good to go with that. So the sooner the better. If it does go after 1 October, that's fine, but it falls under the normal standard HPSP effective dates that go in there. So you have to have signed within 30 days of the effective date or beforehand, because we can submit it up to 90 days beforehand. If it's not done by then, we have to have it submitted within 60 days. So. And questions. I think there's a lot of questions in the chat. So.
We'll start from the top, Mr. Dell.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we able to apply for the new HPSP RB in particular if we currently have an assignment pay contract?
Yes, absolutely. So if you have an assignment pay contract, you can apply for an RB agreement. They're separate entities within that, and they're not stacking obligations. So if you apply for a 6-year RB agreement and you have a 4-year assignment pay agreement, they're served concurrently, and they have different meanings for that. An RB agreement keeps you in the Corps. An assignment pay agreement keeps you at that specific service unit that you're in, similar to SDP.
What happens if your facility will not sign off on the paperwork? Can you go to the regional IHS area?
So that's a good question. So I would reach out to your liaison with any of those questions when it comes down to it. Certain agreements, kind of like SDP, is a little weird. There are reasons a service unit cannot or can deny it, but that typically has to go up to CCHQ portion at that point. BCIPs, RBs, and IPs are all entitlements given to the officer. So that you get it for being a pharmacist, you get it for being a doctor, a dentist, nurse. So they do have to sign the agreements.
I think this ties into the same question. What is the process when a supervisor declines to sign it or says they do not have the budget to support it?
Yeah, so again, I think that's going to come down to a multitude of issues, and that'll get elevated at that point. So if someone's trying to state those portions of it, if you're at a tribal site, it's part of the MOA that you're entitled to your HPSPs. Specific to that, it is an eligibility requirement, and I think that it's pretty well known by that point. Ms. Davidson, anything more you want to add on that?
I will just add that the policy is very specific as to the reasons why this entitlement can be declined, and it is for reasons that the officer makes themselves ineligible. So if you do not have your license, if you do not have your practice hours, if this is a renewal, it has to be a very specific. Not having a budget or funding is not a reason listed in the policy for ineligibility for them not to sign it. I will also state that if in case they want to pursue not signing it, it is not even an agency's call. So what we would have to do is that supervisor, that service unit would have to send a justification through us, and we have to route it to what is called a health profession special pay board. It is the pay board then makes the final determination whether the officer should or should not receive the pay. So because this is a commission core pay, the agency can weigh in. We can say yes or no, but ultimately it is that pay board's determination.
Absolutely, well put. And you can see that section specifically in 6-2 in the policy where it talks about approval and denial.
Okay. If an officer will be receiving an accession bonus for a 4-year commitment, can that same officer also apply or sign up for a 4-year or 6-year retention bonus concurrently?
Great question. You can't. So when you're signing on for an ascension bonus, you have signed up for that agreement period of time. Once you've completed that period, then you'll be eligible to be able to sign up for a retention bonus.
Who covers the retention bonus funding or cost? Is it the agency, specific location? I'll start with that question first.
So it's the exact same cost that would be for your basic pays or anything else. So it still comes down to the service unit. So when it comes down to any pays that you're going to be receiving, it comes out of the same can.
Is the retention bonus agreement with the Corps or with a specific location?
Great question. RB agreements are tied specifically to the Corps. So when you sign up for an RB agreement, while it's paid by your agency, it is for you to be able to stay within the Corps. Unlike an ascension bonus ties you to that specific agency, not necessarily service unit. Whereas then we look at things like assignment pay and SDP, and those tie you to the specific service unit. Hope that makes sense.
So can officers move within the agency or Corps and still maintain that agreement?
For an RB, absolutely. You can still move within agencies so long as it is a commitment to the Corps. It's a Corps policy. It's meant for you to stay in the Corps.
So what if budget changes and funding is not available in future years of the RB? And can programs commit a longer retention bonus if future budgets are inconsistent?
As of right now, this is what the policy states when it comes down to this. And again, it's RB agreements, IP, and everything else are entitlement portions that you can get. You're signing up for the Corps. It's part of the cost of having a commissioned Corps officer. It's something that has to end up being paid for you specifically for that. An agency or a service unit can't come to the point where at some point they can say, you know what, we don't want to pay BAH for you anymore. We don't want to pay subsistence allowance. We saw that you get cheap food over at Walmart. These are entitlements that go along with being a commissioned Corps officer. They're entitled pays that you get.
For potential officer applicants, do they need to wait to apply to the Commission Corps after the 1st of October to ensure they're eligible for the accession bonus? Or can they begin in the application process now?
That is a great question, and we currently have that posed out to CCHQ on that. I would say within a couple of different professions, it doesn't seem to really affect it. Because typically from what I've seen from the ascension bonuses are smaller than what the retention bonuses would be. But it is a great question. And in these about 4 or 5 months that we're waiting up until October, we have asked that question specifically. So hopefully we get clarification back from CCHQ. Your mind's right on the same point that our minds were, and we asked the question about it.
Can you do 2 6-year agreements in your career?
If you have the time and eligibility to be able to do that, and it's still applicable within the HPSP policy, CCI 633.01, I like saying it because I know it. Absolutely. So if you sign up for a 6-year agreement now and you have additional 6 years to be able to give afterwards, you absolutely can keep that going. Similar to if you're signing up for a 4-year agreement, everything else.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking through the questions that have not been answered. If it is not optional for a supervisor to deny HPSP, assuming the officer is fully eligible, why is the supervisor's signature even required?
Not entirely sure. It's more of a letting them know within that portion of it that you are getting this rate. And at the same point, right, they do have the option in case that there is something that is very specifically wrong, which they can appeal to an HPSP board for that. While it's an entitlement, it's also letting the agency and the service unit know that one specifically, this is what's going to be changing in your pay. And it's kind of it's kind of a heads up so that they know it, their budget knows it, and that's why budget signs on to that so they can budget and factor in those positions instead of being a part of like one of our sister agency or services like the Army or something like that, the Department of Defense, where they just have pot of money and they say, oh, this is getting paid, here's pot of money. Instead, you have to understand that you still work with service units, you still work with agencies, and they still have to work through their budgets through the year.
So when will the retention bonus form be updated to include the 6-year option?
Fantastic question. We're waiting on it. We're hoping by June. We're hoping to have all this stuff out before 90 days before that's eligible so we can start getting those out to everyone. We know that it's in some of its final approval states, but we're still expecting it around June. Again, we're waiting for some more answers on that.
How does the new HPSP relate to special duty pay, and any updates on when we can expect to receive SDPs in our bank accounts?
Excellent question. So it doesn't directly relate, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to have some sort of connection at it. So with this HPSP new policy coming out, there's obviously going to be an increase in which everyone's going to start getting a higher pay amount. Now, as we know with SDP has the ability to adjust. So based off some of the questions where people are talking about budgetary, they can attempt to adjust your SDP. So if they feel like that they signed this on for all their pharmacists, and all their pharmacists are now getting an increase in amount of money, that's not saying a service unit can't change the rates, but they've always been eligible to change the rates as they go. That being said, with SDP, you still have that 1 year of protection of whatever rate that you applied for. You're able to be protected at that rate based off the application going forward. But we also know with SDP, and based off the discussions and based off the classes we've given, that SDP has the ability to go up or down, right? So they can adjust and change SDP as they see the need, right? So let's say that they use SDP to recruit officers and they needed 30 officers there, and now they're like, hey, we got all 30 officers, they can adjust the rates. To the second question on SDP and the updates, we're still awaiting to see exactly what's happening with SDP. There's been conversations about this potentially happening sometime midsummer to try to get pushed out, but we understand that FSB has lost a lot of individuals when it comes down to who they have force-wise within FSB will get these processed. We are constantly looking for updates on it, and we are talking to them every other week on this. So we're very well tracking all your SDPs. If you've received any word back on SDP from myself when it's been submitted, just know that it's there. Your agreement's going to get backdated to the agreement date that it was put on, and everything else should be looking forward. But real updates on it, we're still hoping sometime either mid to end of summer.
And I think this is an excellent point for officers to also know that I would advise not to go out and make any major purchases until you actually see it hit your bank account, both for the HPSP starting on 1 October and to the SDP. So that's just my word of advice. Okay. As a pharmacist, if you're already receiving the IP and BCIP, do you need to take any action, or will these increases in pays be reflected on your paycheck automatically?
So as far as we're aware, and from what the CCI does say about increased rates for IP and BCIP, you do have to reapply. So once that's eligible, you're going to have to reapply for incentive pay and BCIP to be able to get the increased rates. That being said, I'll tell you what, I'm tracking very diligently every pharmacist we have and every officer we have in general. And as soon as we start getting agreements in, I'll be tracking to see who hasn't submitted agreements, and I'll do a follow-up. I'm not saying you should use that as your safety net, but I am saying that we'll be keeping a pretty well track. But yes, you will have to reapply, and it does come with a new 12-month commitment. So again, we're getting clarification on that from CCHQ, but the best answer I got for you right now.
For our engineers, one of the notes in here is that engineers were not allowed to submit their license or their PE license. If you get any sort of rejection when you submit your license, please reach directly out to me, because they should be accepting your PE license into your record, and it should reflect on your PIR.
Yeah.
All right. Can we get a copy of these slides? This is being recorded, so we will place this recording out on the DCPS website, and we will include a copy of the PDF slides in that website. Okay, practice hours is current, still the date deadline noted on self-service site, or does this change if we're submitting a new RB?
So I think clarification of the question is, when are you supposed to put in your practice hours? Is that accurate? I guess maybe I didn't hear the question right.
Commander Smith, if you want to come off of mute, you can definitely rephrase the question, sir.
Yeah, the currently on the self-service site, it gives a range, like the date range and the end date range, the end date. There's a small text that says the hours have to be in by this last date. If you are submitting a new agreement, you made a comment about being careful about practice hours. Are you still submitting practice hours according to the current deadline, or are we anticipating a new deadline based on submitting a new agreement and trying to submit practice hours earlier than we otherwise would have?
Perfect question. Gotcha. A little slow on the uptake for me. So it's whatever your current deadline is. So when you submit practice hours, for anyone that's going to have an RB agreement, it's typically you have to resubmit it on the anniversary of your RB agreement. So that's typically your timeline. For most people, I think it was around January timeframe when it came down to that. But as long as you're keeping up the same portion and you're doing the same practice hours as you typically are within the same time period, there shouldn't be any issues. Just making sure that you have it updated. Pretty sure that there's a lot of individuals out there who haven't had practice hours updated in the system for a very long time, and that's really why I'm tying in the fact that to make sure you have practice hours updated, because of the fact that it's only going to slow and delay getting your HPSP out. Not only that, but it causes CCHQ to have to send an email back and have to look at it and say that they're not processing it now. It becomes a bit of a headache. So again, biggest thing is just make sure you're doing your practice hours. You're getting your practice hours updated in the system. You're doing all the right things.
Now, I think also understanding, Commander Smith, to your question is if you update or renegotiate your retention bonus and say your original or previous retention bonus was annually renewed in January, and you now submit a new retention bonus in 1 October, your date will change. So you'll have to have your anniversary date of your practice hours on or before the 1st of October if you renegotiate it. Okay. Yes, BCIP has increased from $6,000 to $8,000 for all categories that are listed and eligible under the board certified incentive pay. If you're under an RB agreement, can we move into a different agency?
Yep. So if you're under an RB agreement, you can absolutely move agencies. I don't know why you would. IHS the best, but yeah, you do have the option to be able to move between agencies. Again, it ties you to the core, not to an agency.
Okay. For the 60-day sick leave requirement, does it matter if medical affairs branch is in approval of temporary need for increased sick leave? I would say those are case by case basis. So I would definitely reach out to your regional liaison if you were going to be going above the 60 days of sick leave, depending upon the reason, if it's for surgery, if it's you're with child. I think that I would reach out to the regional liaison for those specific situations. In most cases, you won't go before a health profession retention board to make a determination whether your HPSP should remain in place or be turned off. So I would definitely reach out to your regional liaison.
And I will say that specifically in the policy, it does talk about maternity specifically with that. It's not applicable for that. But anything else, exactly what Ms. Davidson's saying.
Okay. Can we get special duty pay and health profession special pay at the same time?
Absolutely, right? So SDP is its own different thing. HPSP is just the standard pays that you are entitled to within your category, and everything else. They're two different things. You absolutely can get them at the same time.
Okay. If near end of 30 years and a new agreement would be less money due to less time available to be in the Corps, can you do nothing and keep your current HPSP agreement?
Yeah, So if you don't want to redo any agreements and you're too close to your 30 years, you absolutely can. Your rates are going to continue. Any agreements that you currently have with CCHQ will continue. That being said, with the exception of BCIP, when it comes down to dietitians, we had a whole blurb on there for that. But if you don't want to do a new RB agreement or renegotiate something, you don't have to.
So are engineers and EHOs now required to enter practice hours to receive IP and retention pay? And if so, is there guidance on how to log these practice hours?
Great question. No idea. I'm going to go with no as the current answer. Again, we're trying to figure out clarification on those things because they did just started including you guys. So I don't know if they fully fleshed that portion out yet themselves.
We'll circle back, Commander Ireland, to the engineer categories and environmental health to ask that question. If an officer receives an annual retention bonus payment, but then requests and is approved for retirement prior to the completion of the year, how will the recruitment process work? Recoupment process work?
So I'll tell you this, within the policy, and it does talk about that within the policy itself, you cannot voluntarily retire if you have an RB agreement. So if you're requesting for that, and the answer that should come back from our agency, any agency, CCHQ, is that you have a current RB agreement, you cannot retire. There are obviously situations in which that's different. And I think they do address that within the policy itself. Now, a non-voluntary retirement is different, and recoupment can vary based off that. For disability retirements and everything like that, there doesn't end up being a point of recoupment when it comes down to the RB agreement. They just don't pay you out anymore, right? So you kind of end up stopping. Once they figure out what that is, that's a different beast. But typically, when we talk about any sort of RB agreement recoupment, they're going to recoup back what you have not earned. So let's say theoretically, the way RB agreement works for everyone's understanding is that they pay you all the lump sum of your RB agreement for that year that you haven't yet been retained for. So they say, here's your $20,000 retention bonus. Stay in the Corps for another year. That's what you're supposed to do. But if for some reason, whether it be for you or otherwise, you end up getting out, the recruitment process goes and they look at it and say, how long have they been in the Corps for that amount of money? So they said he was in for 5 months this year of the 12 months, and we gave him $20,000. What they're going to want back is that portion of it, right? So they're going to want any unearned portions back. It gets in the weeds.
For the retention bonuses, the amounts listed, is that amount given per year, or is it a total amount given over the 6-year term?
It is per year. So at the start of your agreement, that's what you'll get. And on the anniversary, every time such, that's how much you're getting. Unlike an ascension bonus, which is a lump sum payment that you get once and you get a 4-year commitment for.
Okay. May an officer currently under an assignment pay agreement but offered a position with a different area sign up for retention bonus or SDP with a new position, have the assignment pay agreement expire?
Can you say that again, ma'am?
May an officer currently under an assignment pay agreement but offered a new position within a different area sign up for the retention bonus or SDP with the new position and have the assignment pay agreement expired? So I think what they're saying is if you're currently on an assignment pay agreement at your current duty station and you're going to transfer to another position, can you sign up for both the retention bonus and the special duty pay if available at the new position, and just transfer from the assignment pay agreement over to the special duty pay agreement?
I say we're talking about apples and oranges. So an RB agreement, completely different from any of that. And again, it ties you to the agency, or it ties you to the commission corps, not the agency. So you can sign up for an RB agreement any day of the time, anytime you want when you're eligible for it. So that's different from that. So absolutely RB agreement, get all the RB agreements. When it comes down to assignment pay, again, if you remember reading your assignment pay agreement, you're not supposed to seek reassignment to any other place. Is that always the case? We know that sometimes that a service unit may allow you to be eligible for that, or they may be allowing that. I would reach out to your regional liaison for better questions on that when it comes down to it. When it comes to assignment pay, you are allowed to terminate your assignment pay and sign up for SDP, but for transferring to a different service unit to sign up for SDP, a little bit of a gray area. I'd reach out to your liaison to see what answers you can get on that. And again, it comes down to your service unit too, because they can deny you the ability since you're under an assignment pay agreement. And they said that they were going to pay you because you were going to stay there that long.
Okay. Is the retention bonus paid in a lump sum annually, or is it broken down by month over each year?
Nope, paid lump sum. So at the anniversary point of your agreement, so everyone's agreement, if you sign up for 1 October, they pay it lump sum 1 October, and then next year you should be getting it in the October pay. So really, it's probably 1 November. Just know that with all these new agreements, there's going to be a lot of agreements going to CCHQ, so it's going to take a while for your HPSPs to process. It's going to be a lot, but we'll be keeping track of all the agreements and making sure they all get published.
A PE license generally expires every 2 years with the state that they are registered in. This is stated on the certificate renewal of the license, requiring the engineer to submit a required number of, I don't know what PDHs are, I'm assuming like your practice hours, every 2 years. How will a retention bonus agreement be treated for longer than a 2-year expiration on the license?
Excellent question. So you can still sign up for the longer agreements. The difference is that if you get to a point where you are lapsing in eligibility for it, so if you decide that you have a PE license and you get it for the first 2 years and you're like, you know what, I'm not going to redo this. But at some point your license drops off and that and this is caught within some sort of clerical check, they're going to ask for their money back because you no longer meet the eligibility requirements for your RB agreement. That's a decent question when it comes down to all this, but that question falls within any professional category of not meeting eligibility for your pays. What'll probably happen is you'll go in front of an HPSP board due to that. It's similar to if you end up with a marginal COER or anything else and that's noticed, that information gets pushed up and pushed on to an HPSP board to review your case and see what they want to do with it.
If your normal retention bonus anniversary month is August and you submit paperwork in July to renegotiate a new retention bonus, will you receive the prior retention bonus amount in August and then the newly negotiated amount would take place the following August? Or would it be pushed back until October 1st and be paid in a newly negotiated amount in October?
So if your normal agreement is in August and you decide that you're going to sign up for a new agreement in October, yes, but it's complicated. So, which isn't really the answer. So what's going to happen is that if your anniversary is going to end up being in August and you decide that you're going to redo it, what they're going to do is they're going to pay you that retention bonus. So let's say, again, you get $20,000. Here you go. You get your $20,000 retention bonus. What's going to happen is that you're going to say, hey, I want to renegotiate my agreement. I want to do either the same time or longer. Because yeah, let's say I want to get that 6-year rate now, 1 October. What they're going to do is, great, we got this memo. We're now looking at it. He's currently receiving a retention bonus. This is what it is. And so what they're going to do is they're going to, once they process that agreement, they're going to say, hey, here's the pay for this RB agreement. And hey, we want the pay for the RB agreement that you received in August back, prorated based off the number of months. So in August, you would have served 2 months of that RB agreement. So they're going to want 10 months of that portion back, prorated based off that. It really shouldn't affect your bank account too terribly bad because as soon as they're taking that back, you're renegotiating for a higher rate. So they're giving you money at the same time that they are taking money away. So does that make sense? I hope that answers the question.
So are there other board certifications allowed for engineers for board cert pay other than those listed on the table? Most of the ones on the table seem more applicable to EHOs, like the Certified Healthcare Facility Manager or the Certified Energy Manager, etc.
Yeah, great question. I think that's exactly that. There are not. So I would say that I think a lot of this, and Ms. Davidson, Brad Admiral Batiste, can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of this came down through the CPOs with some of these rates and looking at some of the DOD rates when it came down to that. but these are the rates listed. So if it's not listed on there, basically what I was talking about with that, you just don't qualify.
So when is the lump sum paid? 1 October 2025 for a new RB or a month later based on how it is processed?
Awesome. Great question. Again, it's paid in your October paycheck. So what happens with subsequent agreements is that you'll get that lump sum pay. It's probably going to end up hitting 1 November if your date is 1 October for that, or anytime within October. Because they
But
do have to reproduce orders, and the new order comes out, and that's when they pay it. I would say for the first round that goes forward, expect delays because they have 90 days to be able to process it normally, and we're currently not in normal times or situations because they do not have nearly the capacity of individuals there. Hopefully everything goes swimmingly and everything gets done in 90 days, but I wouldn't expect it.
For the retention bonus agreement, when will the option for the 6-year agreement be updated?
Again, so we answered this a couple times. We're hoping for in June 2025. That's again why we're not pushing anything out to you guys on agreements. That's why we don't want you to submit agreements yet, because we don't have all the updated questions answered and paperwork back.
Last question I have right now are the liaisons or CC reaching out to agencies to make them aware of these changes?
Great question. So your leader, Ms. Davidson, you want to take it?
Sure, I can take it. So we have provided a leadership brief out to senior leadership in IHS. We are also briefing them tomorrow morning on the pay changes and the estimated cost to both areas and categories for our commission officers on the adjustments of rates. After that, it will be briefed down to the area directors and senior leadership by the regional liaisons. So your senior leadership through your chain of commands will be aware of the new HPSP pay and the breakdown. Yes, and it will include tribal sites and tribal leadership as well.
All right. Any other questions? I can answer all the questions all day. If I don't have an answer, I can at least look it back up at some point, either in the policy or get a clarification from CCHQ.
So I will echo the comments from Rama Batiste just briefly is we really, really appreciate both all the work that has gone into updating this HPSP. And again, in some categories, they never received HPSP, or the last time that HPSP was ever updated was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So this was, I will say, a monumental feat on behalf of the CPOs, the liaisons, and even some of our own officers that participated in doing the research and the background on looking at DoD rates, doing the comparison to civil service pay. So this is really a wonderful opportunity for our officers. I'm really excited that we got some of the categories added to it, especially from a recruitment and retention aspect of it. And I really appreciate all you taking the time to come and listen to us for these updates. More to follow. We will definitely send out as soon as we do get that 6-year agreement. We'll also provide updates on timelines, who you need to sign, how to submit them, where to submit them, and thank you.